Hello, my dear drawing and painting enthusiasts. Welcome to my studio for today's tutorial. Today I would like to look in depth at a reasonably new tool that is used for drawing. So whether you're drawing with graphite pencils, pastels, charcoals, you probably have seen people using them or maybe already have tried using them yourself. But are you using them correctly? And do you know all the different tips and tricks on maintaining them, what they are, and the amazing textures that you create with them in your drawings? Another thing we will also look in this video is, are there any alternatives to smudge sticks? So if, for example, you are on a really tight budget, if you are just sitting at home and you want to draw and you don't want to drop everything and run to the art shop, perhaps that part of the video will also be super useful for you to see. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe for more tips and tricks. Without further ado, let's have a look at these amazing and very handy little things. Now, they haven't been very popular because with academic style drawings, you don't really smudge anything. You want to create a very prominent, strong cross-hatching texture where each pencil mark is visible and stands on its own. But recently, with more of the photorealism and super soft techniques that people are enjoying in their art, these little guys are becoming a really good tool to help you out in some sticky situations. So first of all, let's have a look at them. What are they and how do they work? Well, they're actually a roll of very thin newsprint kind of paper that has been rolled to create this very sort of a nice firm cylinder, almost like a really like a thick pencil type of a shape. Now, as you can see, they come in different shapes and sizes. Some of them are very thin and some of them are quite thick. If you are a little bit confused about it, you can always go into the art shop and just get a pack of different sizes. They are probably some of the least expensive materials that you will find in the art shop. So you're not saying goodbye to too many dollars in your pocket when you want to get some of these guys. Now you will see that they actually have numbers on them. Now these numbers correspond to the size, just like you would with a brush size, for example. That way, you know, if you have a size number 2, for instance, and you want something thicker, you want at least size number 6. So why would you want them different sizes? Well, just like with brushes and other tools, you want to make sure that for little details you can use a tiny little smudge sticks, and for larger areas, especially if you're working on large drawings or background, you can use larger smudge sticks. And as you can see, some of my smudge sticks that I've been using quite a bit are actually starting to unroll, because all they're really held up by is just a little bit of glue, and I think they press them with water and so on. But when they start to unroll, a really good tip is just to put a little piece of masking tape or any other tape to hold them together as you work. Another important thing that I want to point out is that if you're one of those people who likes to draw with pastels and with graphite and with charcoals, and you might like to use smudge sticks with all of these materials, try to keep a separate set for your pastels and charcoals and a separate set for your graphite. It's just that these two materials or even 3 materials don't actually sometimes work well together, so you don't really want pinks and blues and whatever from your soft pastels, for instance, mixing into your charcoal or graphite drawings. Although I personally just keep different sticks for different color variations, so that way I can still use the same set of sticks with pastels, soft pastels and charcoals. Okay, and here we come to my next point, and this is something that I get asked a lot. One of the really common questions: how do I keep my sticks clean? right? And I mean, I understand you working with a lot of graphite, for example, and then you working on something that's super light, and you go in with your stick and you end up leaving a really thick mark. So what do you want to do? You want to actually grab a piece of sandpaper. Yes, your regular sandpaper. Doesn't have to be super fine or super rough. Something in the middle will do. Just whatever, whatever you've got around the house. Sometimes you can even buy separate sanding blocks from your art shop. But, if you've got sandpaper, you've got sandpaper. And what you want to do is you just want to sand the dirty area off. Literally, that's all you need to do. But if constant shaving off is not your thing, because it does take some time, and as you can see, it's quite a dusty process, I've got a really useful tip for you guys. And this is something that I do with my drawings. Because, as I said, they're not super expensive, I actually just have a few different ones. And as you can see, I use one end of my stick for really dark areas where I use a lot of really soft pencils, like 6Bs and 9Bs and so on. And then I might use another side of it for when I'm using something more like 4B and 3B. So when you've got all these different sticks, you can reserve them, one for these kind of values and another for others. Now it can also be helpful because when it actually accumulates quite a bit of charcoal, you don't actually need to deposit a lot of charcoal on paper because there's already stuff that's built in there, and you can just use that to shade without even applying any pencil on. So now that we looked at the uses and looking after them and cleaning them and so on, let's have a look at what kind of textures and techniques that you can create with them. And I will demonstrate with graphite pencils. So for example, you're drawing and drawing and drawing, and you might like to create a softer look where you blend things together. In that situation, you can just grab your smudge stick and give it a good smudge, and you will see how those lines are disappearing right in front of you. But there is something that a lot of people get wrong about smudge sticks. I see that with my students in my classes, and sometimes people just show me their art and they say, what's wrong? I was using the smudge stick, but things just didn't happen the way I was planning for them to happen. Well, might be why you are having these problems. Number one thing that you need to avoid is building up your colors super strong from the get-go. So if I have really strong lines like this and try and blend them, I will have a much harder time doing this. And at the end, some of these lines will still be visible there, floating in the gray cloud. So if you want to achieve a really smooth look, you need to build up your layers without applying too much pressure and building it up in different directions to minimize that harshness. In this case, everything happens so much quicker and so much smoother and without any strain. And mistake number two is this. You are drawing along, creating your, let's say a background color, and then you come in with a smudge stick and you have this really strange feeling that if you press hard enough on the smudge stick, you will blend out your graphite or pastel or whatever you're using faster. So you grab it like this and you just... Now the problem here is when you are working in this way, you're going to create a really patchy look, especially if you're working and trying to smudge a large area. The best way to go about it is less pressure, but going over more times. So rather than pressing hard enough, pressing in the medium sort of a soft way, but going over and over and over and over again. You see how much smoother this is? And less likely that you will create a patchy look, because if you need to expand this, you can, still go soft and expand into a larger area. Whereas here, if you've done this, then You see the difference? Yeah. So this is where another mistake that happens a lot, and instead of making your drawing smoother and more beautiful, you actually enhance some really weird patches. So make sure to go soft, but many times over, rather than pressing super hard but going just a couple of times. Another point towards this as well is that once it comes to erasing, this technique will be much easier to erase if you want to create some highlights compared to this one, because with this one you're really etching it into the paper, almost damaging the paper that you're drawing on. So that's why this is a bit of a no-no compared to this one. Now another little tip that I would like to share with you, and that is when you are shading something in, you actually working on an object or a shape or something like this, like for example it's a background that you want to be quite flat and quite smooth. Maybe it's an animal's fur that you are trying to create, give it a bit of a softer look, or perhaps it's a, I don't know, some kind of a circular object or something like this. Now when it comes to smudging all of these different types, you need to work together with your drawing, because remember, when you're smudging, you're not just smudging a drawing, it's part of the drawing. So you're drawing with your pencil, just like you are drawing with your smudge stick. What you need to do is you need to make sure that you're going along with what you're trying to create. In case of some kind of a backdrop that you want to have quite a uniform way, go along with your pencil marks and then go across your pencil marks. That will allow you to create a very smooth, very soft, and overall very uniform look. Now if you are working on an animal fur, as I said, or something that's textured, rather than trying to smudge it, like say with it here, into nothing, make sure that you go along and that some of the pencil marks are visible. So you can achieve that by going along with your lines and working in layers as well. So you've built something up, you've smudged it, then you build something up as well for another layer, maybe gave that a smudge as well, and you can create really interesting looks. What if you're working on something circular? Well, then that's exactly what you can do. You can also smudge it in circles. And that way you get that perfect blending that helps you to describe your shape. Now if you are working on something very large where it's really hard, like for example, I don't know, an A2 drawing, and you need to make sure that the background is super soft, and you using your smudge stick, first of all make sure to use the largest smudge stick that you've got on hand, and secondly make sure that you actually go in number 8s, like this. This will give you the least patchiest look when you're working on something large. Okay, now let's have a look at substitutes that you can use instead of your smudge sticks. Now it's not the same thing, and I will show you why. You might like to choose some over the others in some situations. But before I do that, I want to ask you, are you enjoying this video? Is this something that is actually really useful? Are you learning lots of new tips? Is that making you feel more confident about next time, for example, you go into an art shop? If so, make sure that you check out my Patreon page, because I have lots of really cool videos there on different kinds of drawing and painting techniques. Some of these tutorials are great for beginners, and some really in-depth tutorials, really long videos where I cover techniques like how to structure and shade the face, color theory, and many other really interesting topics. So make sure to stop by and have a look. We also do a lot of fun things, like my patrons suggest which videos they might like to see, and everyone gets to vote on those different ideas, and then I create videos with the most amount of votes, and so many other things. So make sure to stop by and check it out. Okay, so here I have materials that you might have already handy in your home or school that you can use to create very similar effects to smudge sticks. So here I have a piece of sponge. This is just your regular sort of a, washing sponge that, I don't know, maybe you wash your dishes with. Then I have a Q-tip, a little cotton bud thing that I'm pretty sure most households would have handy in large numbers. You might already have some brushes. Another thing which is also very common, and that is a tissue. So just like a paper towel or even a toilet paper, if you can't find a better use for it. So let's do a little trial. So I'm going to shade few areas, and each of these areas will be tested out for each of these different materials. Let's start with the sponge. For the test, what I'm going to do is first I'm going to do a line, and then I'm going to try and sort of blend this area out. So that way you can see two different ways of working with these smudging materials. So if I want to do a line here with a sponge, see, it's working quite well. Now if I want to completely smudge out these lines, okay, so here we go. It smudged it a little bit, but as you can see, this is still staying quite clean. Now our next one is the brush. So I actually have two different brushes here. Now this brush is not very good for actually smudging, but it's really good for giving an overall sort of a blur if you want to create a really blurry effect to soften the highlights and things like that. So I wouldn't bother testing this one, but I will show you with this one. This is just a little bit more firmer, as you can see, and it is much more useful for blending. So here we go. I've got this line here that I've just blended out, and I'm gonna try and blend out these lines completely out. It's actually doing a better job than the sponge, but it hasn't really blended everything out. It's quite small. I think it's a bit tricky to work on a larger scale, unless of course you use a much larger brush. Now let's have a look and see how Q-tip would work with this. So first I'm gonna blend out a line. So that's like our little control, how much control we've got over smudging. So that it did actually quite a good job. Look at that, with doing a line. And now let's have a look. Yeah, it's actually doing quite a good job there as well, but again, it's quite small. So if I'm working on a really large artwork, this is definitely going to take me forever. Now let's have a look at the tissue paper. Now let's try and maybe roll it up to get quite a thin point here to make a line. So now this is quite uncomfortable because you see it sort of bends and it doesn't really, it's much harder to control. And now let's try and blend the larger area. Oh, it's doing a really good job, and look at that, it's actually much quicker than doing it with any of the other things to blend this, and that's a beautiful result. And now for a control check, let's try two different smudge sticks. So I'm going to use a large smudge stick. Oh, look how quick that's done that, and smudging an area out. A reasonably good job. And now let's try a thin smudge stick. Yeah, this is perfect. Look how much control you've got over, say, little things like that. But as you can imagine, doing a larger area with the smudge stick, oh, this will be pain. So what's the verdict? This is quite handy if you want to smear it a little bit, but not if you want to completely get rid of the lines, because you can see that all the lines are kind of still there. If you are thinking of a brush, then I actually really like using brush. I like how soft of a look that it actually gives the bristles. It's super soft. So if you want, if you're drawing portraits and things where you want that super lovely softness, you know, almost like spray painted, kind of a hazy look, then brushes are really good for that. Now, what about a little Q-tip? I think for what it is, it's actually really cute how we had a lot of control, probably not as much control as with a thin smudge stick, but it was actually quite nice, and you know, if you have nothing on hand, this will do a beautiful job. But as you can see, because of its size, if you want to smudge a large area, you will kind of be struggling, and I'd imagine it'll also be quite patchy just because it's so small. Now, what about our friend the tissue paper? Well, tissue paper did a really bad job when I needed a detailed, thin, straight little line, but it did an amazing job in blending larger areas out. In fact, I use this sometimes in my art when I need something really large and reasonably smooth. Sometimes I'd even first smudge it with a smudge stick, and then I go over it with this. The only negative thing is that you do get a lot of dust from working with paper. And now, of course, you know, the smudge stick here, you can see how there's quite a bit of control, especially with the thin one. You get really nice sharp lines, and of course you would want to use a larger smudge stick for working on larger areas. So up to you. Do you want to rush out and buy smudge sticks, or do you want to experiment with these other things that you probably have around your house? Up to you. But I'd say definitely give everything a go, because you might just find and discover amazing textures that you can create with these, you know, from a first look, these mundane everyday objects, you know, like little Q-tips and things like that. So make sure to leave your thoughts and ideas under the video. Do you use smudge sticks, and what techniques do you use them for? I want to say a big thank you to my wonderful patrons that are supporting this channel and making it possible for you guys here on YouTube to see more videos and also get to see all the extra videos on Patreon. I also would like to remind you to subscribe if you haven't done that so far. And guys, don't forget to practice and experiment, because remember, experimentation is really a key. Now, there is another thing that I didn't talk about during the video, and that is you can actually make your own smudge sticks. If you would like to see a video on that, please let me know in the comments, and I will be happy to show you some more tips on how to do that as well. I hope you guys have a lovely day, and thank you so much for drawing with me and hanging out with me again. And make sure to check out the videos that are popping out on your screen at the moment, as they have really good tips on drawing and painting. Until next time.